or have attended our recent webinar, big thank you to you. I've actually received more than 100 questions, because we've been asking people, what are your top questions about creating passive income through property? And one that has come up really interesting is this, will rents actually go down because of COVID-19, the coronavirus, or if people are losing their jobs, getting pay cuts, does that then cause rents to go down? And what's the impact then for investors? So as you know, property is actually one of the most defensive strategies in any economic situation, because ultimately, when you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people need a home to stay in, right? A shelter to stay in, regardless of where the recession, whether there's a recession or whatever the economic condition. In fact, in times like COVID, everybody is now staying at home, working from home. So in terms of how does that then impact? For example, if somebody loses their job, will they be able to pay the rent, for example? Yeah. So I think to answer that, it's actually a great question, and I wanted to share this article that just came out in Singapore as well, where it talks about how condo and HDB rents are actually coming down in June, right? And this is actually in the Business Times in the real estate section, just published today actually. And it says, amid the COVID-19 outbreak, rents are coming down. And by the way, I think this is really important. Why we shouldn't make our investment decisions based on just what we read in the papers, because very often a lot of these reporters are just reporting data. They may not be professional investors themselves. So it says here, rental market in June dipped 0.6%, year on year dipped 0.7% and 2.2% for different regions. So looking at data like this, an amateur investor might think, oh no, then should I invest or should I not invest? How does it impact? What does it mean? I get less rent. So for those of you who haven't already attended the webinar, check out www.bornpoordirect.com/webinar. I will post it in the link below as well. I'm doing another webinar coming up, so make sure you get yourself signed up, because there's so many considerations beyond that. But I think another important thing is this. I'm going to share this screen with you again. Just hold on. Is this, right? So this is looking at year-on-year property price differences, and this is in the UK, and it's going to be the same in many places. So depending on market conditions, you can see this 3%, 1.5%, and the graph looks like it's going up and down. Does this then mean that rents are going up and down? Actually, very little fluctuations, because most of the time, rents are, contracts are for a year or 2 years, so potentially even longer. For those of you who know, I actually work with corporate tenants, and we secure 3 years or 5-year contracts, and the rent then keeps pace with inflation. So there are lots of tips that we can do in order to make sure that our rent is secure. At the same time, year-on-year data basically means from last year compared to this year compared to last year, has it gone up or down? And most of the time you see here from 2012 all the way to 2019, it's always been going up. It's just how much, right? From 1% to 3%. So if you look over, and you see this in many countries, this is from 1999 all the way, if you scroll to the right here, to almost 2020. This is the general trend of rental prices. Yeah, where basically it's essentially just going up and up and up. And if you've never rented property before, maybe we may not realize that in Singapore, but anyone that has rented property anywhere in the world will know that rent, if you're a tenant, you never hear the landlord coming to you and say, hey, maybe next year let me lower the rent. It doesn't happen. All right, and ultimately rent is really a function of supply and demand, right? So people might think in times of in a downturn, for example, COVID or whatever, will there be lower demand for rentals? Actually, if you think about it, it's pretty counterintuitive, because if in places like Singapore, where a lot of people own property, as in they live in the properties they own, then there's little impact. The impact might come in the form of maybe expats, who companies might be closing down operations, for example, and they move back. That could be a downward impact on the demand, and then hence a downward impact on price. But if you look into places where for example, I invest, or investors that I work with invest, where we're looking in parts of the UK, most of the time people are faced with two decisions. One is, should I buy a property or should I rent? And increasingly, the percentage of people renting property actually goes up. And in times of a recession, where be it COVID, or they have a job cut, or they are forced to go on furlough, for example, do you think that more people would then be in a position to put on a deposit, take a loan and buy a property? Or will they be then forced to rent in the time being until they either get another job or wait out this period? I think the answer is pretty obvious. The more people will actually turn to renting, right? And because property is such a basic need, if people can't buy, they will rent. Otherwise they'll be on the streets, right? So actually, that has an increase in demand of rental units, and hence leading to an increase, actually an upward pressure on the price. So which is why, apart from inflation, actually even in an economic downturn, COVID, whatever, buying property and renting it out is a really recession-proof strategy. All right, it's firstly counter-cyclical, and even in the good times, it just continues going up, as we saw in the graph earlier. So of course, as landlords, what we can do is to then as ethical landlords, to see whether the tenants are in a position where is there some way you can negotiate, maybe deferring rent for 1 or 2 months, for example. Of course, this goes down to obviously managing the tenants and the relationship well. I think just to close, there is another big impact on that, which is the supply of units for rent, as we see here. And I think that's an even bigger impact, especially in Singapore, where the HDB, some years back there was a huge shortage, but now BTOs are sprouting out everywhere, condos are sprouting out everywhere, faster than perhaps the rate of population growth, which I mean in recent times it's been a hot topic. So with this almost an oversupply in certain areas, that would actually have an even bigger impact on rent in Singapore than COVID or other things. But more importantly, there are lots of other considerations to think about as to where could I buy such that the rental demand is good, and more importantly, where would I buy such that rent minus all expenses and mortgages would still give me a positive cash flow. Yeah. So in this quick video, I hope it has been helpful for you. Share your comments, questions here. Give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, live life to the full. And this is Daniel from Bomper Direct signing out.